we built a raised bed on top of it. I just put all of this soil and clay and stuff back in there, making sure that I mixed it well with compost, especially in the layered effect. This is a lot of good compost I got from Tom's Mulch. And covered it with about 3 to 4 inches of deep mulch. So that was my solution, building quite a few of those to see what I can do to get rid of that boggy area. Now, it's kind of anecdotal. I've only been there a year now since I put in some of these. I still have more to go. I only have a few right now. Is it working? I kind of want to say it is, but I can't say after a year, but I really think it is. This spring we got a lot of rain, and it did not pool in those corners because everything flows uphill to downhill, and I did not have the pools like I did in that first picture that you saw.
Now, are you planting anything on those raised?
Oh yeah, this is a garden bed.
Okay.
I plant right into it.
I didn't know if you just left it that way, or did you plant?
Yeah, the first year I did, one, because I ran out of time, but two, I kind of wanted things to settle, because I really wanted these to be perennial beds. What I have going in here now is currants, gooseberries, seaberry, some stuff like that. Some stuff blueberries I planted last year, some I just planted about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, blueberries really need a water source. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're going to plant some blueberries, you better have water.
Yes. But I kind of wanted that wood to break down a little bit since this was a perennial. Your first year, you're probably good to plant some annuals because, as you would expect, man, it is going to settle and you're going to have to kind of reshape it and make it pretty again the next year and fill in some spots. So I didn't want to lose any perennial roots. What doesn't do very well at first, you can imagine, is rooting things like a carrot or maybe a sweet potato, because depending, if you build it deep enough, then yeah. But if you're kind of close to that wood core, not so much it needs any depth.
What kind of wood did you use?
I used what was rotting in my woods. There was all kinds of wood. The harder, the better. However, you do want it to be kind of old and kind of starting to rot. When I say the harder, the better, I mean the longer it's going to give you the beneficial effect.
But for most people who
Anything.
have property, they wouldn't have a source like you do on your property.
I would say, honestly, the answer would be whatever you can get for free. If you go on Craigslist and you type in free wood, free firewood, stuff like that, I mean, this wasn't pretty stuff. This was some stuff I cut, some stuff was just sitting out in the woods that had been a tree that had been felled 5 years ago or something.
You get ash trees.
Exactly, and there's going to be a big market for please come haul away my ash limbs, for the next few years. But honestly, wherever you can get, it's pretty easy to. I'm finding as I get into this stuff, it is so easy to find free materials on Craigslist. It's just a gold mine. But whatever you can find, if pine, soft pine is all you have, it's way better than nothing, and they'll give you years of use. Any other questions on those techniques or how I tried to stack them? The other thing I will mention is that if you look into the ecology of this stuff, that as wood breaks down, sometimes it can be a nitrogen sink and can really suck nitrogen in. So maybe your first year, really nitrogen-loving plants aren't going to do so well in something like this, but it's not a nitrogen eliminator, it's a nitrogen sponge. Eventually it's going to release that back as it decays more. So maybe the first year you want to put a little organic nitrogen or something on there. Plant some beans. Okay, jumping again here. Microclimates. This is something that really speaks to the 12 principles. There's all kinds of things you can do with microclimates that kind of, I don't want to say manipulate, but that's what you're doing to guide nature to do what you want to do. Maybe you just want to get crazy and say, you know what, I'm in zone 6A, but to heck with it, I'm growing an orange tree. Now, we're probably not going to, but it makes for a pretty picture. There's some stuff that might be just outside of our zones that you can protect over our harsh winters just to kind of barely get them through. You can create a microclimate by doing something like building a little pond here and solar radiation through the winter, especially because the sun comes up low over the sky, will have a shallow bounce and can be captured by that heat-loving plant there. The other thing you could do is maybe pack some stones or some kind of a thermal mass around this tree to protect it. That creates a microclimate. Another thing you can do, and this is kind of the almost cliche, stereotypical permaculture project that everyone does, is an herb spiral, but it's really such a neat teaching tool because it encapsulates so many things in just one technique. This herb spiral can create so many microclimates. A lot of different herbs. need very different situations, very different places to live. So at the top here, as you would imagine, as you water this or as it rains, water's going to want to seep downhill. Well, then at the top, you're going to put some stuff that can really handle a dry, well-drained soil, like oregano, rosemary, stuff like that. Further down, you're going to want to put stuff that either needs a lot of water, like a parsley, or can tolerate it, like mint. Anything in between. So, I mean, if you want to get nuts about it, you can analyze how each and every single one of these needs just a little bit more water till you get down to the bottom. You can also use this for a solar sink, so that depending which way this is oriented, and typically what happens is that the very bottom of the spiral you want to put north and put a little pond there to have a nice water feature to bring in some beneficial insects and collect any water. So this would be the south area. So anything that really needs a lot of sun, a lot of heat to survive and thrive, you're going to want to put here on the southern area. And oh buddy, especially if you plant it right up next to this brick wall, which is just going to soak up all that heat and slowly release it through the night. You know, you figure out what goes best where. And I actually read some pretty cool stuff of someone who just did an experiment and just basically broadcast everything everywhere and tracked over years. She didn't do anything, but just tracked over years and watched as the herbs would self-seed and migrate where it wanted to go. Now, it's not going to move 8 feet or something in a short amount of time, but it's kind of neat, you know, to see rosemary climb up because it's happier there.
Now, is that just bricks?
Yeah, and you can use whatever you want. Bricks, stones, I've seen some cool stuff with logs. They don't always have to be this tall. They can be shorter and squatter. If you do a Google image search for herb spirals, there's just all kinds of really cool designs. A lot of people use like busted up concrete that they find, cinder blocks. Any other questions on herb spirals or microclimates so far? And I know we have some very skilled people in the room, so if I'm forgetting something or you want to jump in, please do. Microclimate, again, and the reason I wanted to mention this was twofold. One, so many times we just think horizontally, we also need to think vertically, both to make a good use of space, to obtain a yield, but because we can get some cool microclimates. Stuff like grapes and kiwi that really likes to climb and trellis, you can do that with. I had just planted some grapes. This picture was 2 weeks ago, before I got my grape plants in, so that's why it's kind of unfinished. Please pardon that. But I planted some grapes right in here, and it's going to trellis up. And this is my chicken coop, and front door there, this faces west. So this gets all that nice big western sun. So two things, I wanted, my coop is painted kind of dark, and the roof is brown as well. I wanted my grapes to go up and grow towards that heat sink, those dark colors. But also, chickens are very cold hardy. We'll learn that in a couple of weeks if you come. They don't do so well in the heat. So I wanted something that's going to shade their coop, and I figured some nice big grape foliage would do the job there. So don't just think about a microclimate for what will help this one plant, but think of symbiotic relationships and what can I get many things to help each other and provide a microclimate for something else. So building beds. We've gone through all this cool stuff. We've talked about some techniques, but you know, like I just want to put some tomatoes in the ground. I just want to do something simple. Just want to build a bed. A couple things that are kind of big no-nos in the permaculture world: you never spray, you never till. I know maybe there's some scenarios where you need to do a little bit of dirt disturbance or something, like swales or hugelkultur, but for the most part, you never spray, you never till. Both of those are not slow and small solutions. You will always have unintended consequences of stuff that you don't expect. So one alternative to tilling that is really cool, and this is something I'm just starting to play around with, is a broad fork. I've never even heard of this tool before until I was looking for a solution. If there's an area that I know a lot of vehicles have traveled on, or if maybe there was a structure that got taken down, and I know it's really compacted and plants just aren't going to do well if I build a bed there, this broad fork, and I found one of the only places you can buy them new is Johnny Seeds there, and it looks like that. You just kind of step on it and you wiggle it and loosen the dirt. You don't turn it, you don't do anything, you don't pull it out of the ground, it just kind of loosens it up. but that's kind of only in extreme compaction cases. So yes, you know, if you never spray, you never till, things might take a little bit longer to come online and get the way you want them to, but in the long run, you're going to be way better off. Because we need to not think of ourselves as tomato farmers, not think of ourselves as pepper farmers or chicken farmers. Always we're soil farmers. Soil needs to look like that. It needs to have worms and microbes and bacteria and fungus and be alive. And if you look under a microscope, there's just these crazy Godzilla wars of things that are going on. And every single time you put Roundup or have the lawn company or somebody come by, it kills all of that to where we just have dead dirt instead of living soil. The other thing that tilling especially will do is that, you know, in summer gardens, we don't even yet fully understand everything that goes on with root structures and how they interact with fungus networks and all that stuff that's going on. There can be fungus networks that if you laid it out in a chain, and just in a small few shovelfuls, that, you know, could be hundreds of yards of stuff if you laid it out in the end. So we don't even fully understand what's going on there. We know it's beneficial, we don't want to disturb it. So if we don't till, well, how the heck are we going to build a bed? One no-till technique is called sheet mulching or lasagna gardening. You may have seen this. And basically it's just stacking a whole bunch of different layers, especially carbons and nitrogens, as you might expect. Here's a graphic here that comes out of this book. If you only get one book just to start out, it's called Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway. Come check this out here. But here's your soil layer here. Due to a soil test, if you find your pH is wrong, something like that, you need to add soil amendments. You then want to coat everything with cardboard or newspaper to be kind of a weed barrier. And then you just start stacking good stuff. You don't have to be as anal as this is. You know, anything is going to help and it's going to break down over time. But they call for the newspaper and the cardboard, and then 8 to 12 inches of hay. For me, I would definitely use my chicken bedding. A good way to use that. And then a few inches of manure, well-rotted compost, and then this is your deep mulch layer. I always want to finish with that. Now you can plant right into this. Do you want to dig down a little bit, or maybe put in a layer of soil that's kind of near the top? Pull some layers aside. You can plant certain things right into that and do okay, but in a very short amount of time, within a season or so, this is going to just all break down and just be beautiful soil and compost. One design is a keyhole bed, and this is pretty cool because it makes a good use of space. You usually want to design keyholes depending on how long your reach is, so that you can either reach anything from inside the center of the bed there, or from the other side on the outside. You can harvest and weed and do all that stuff. This is kind of a keyhole on steroids. It's a mandala bed. You can think about how to walk into any of those keyholes and you can reach some things if you have a little bit more space. But what's the other thing that this does is that it really creates a lot of edge. We talked about using edge and all the stuff that really springs up on that edge. And, well, here you go. If you just had 3 4-foot by 8-foot square raised beds in this, you wouldn't have near the planting room, and especially not near the edge of what this mandala garden does for you. So we need to build a lot of bins. We need to make some pretty mandala beds. We need a lot of material. That is the one bad thing about sheet mulching. However, again, Craigslist, you go on, and believe it or not, people are just giving away manure. Can you believe that? You just type in free manure and all this. You just go there and all day, can I give you money? I'm like, no, take my manure. It's great. You can make your own compost, which the lovely ladies did a very nice job last week. If you weren't here, I wish you would have been, because they did a nice job talking about compost. So I'm not going to go into a lot, except that it is the key. Everybody needs to be making compost. Some very quick basics for you to jot down is that you need carbons, which are browns, and nitrogens, which can be thought of as greens. The ideal ratio for compost is 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen. And there's people that take it, I hate to say this, almost way too seriously. I picked this up for $1, and it was, I think, in 1957 was the copyright date. The Rodale Guide to Composting. It's just rotting stuff, you know? It's not that hard. So to make it simple, because some things are more carbonaceous and some things are more nitrogenous, if that's a word, keep it simple. Just layer 50% of browns, 50% of greens. You're going to be fine. Larger piles work much better for smaller piles, so maybe you can collect your stuff and then form one good pile at the end. Like a 3 by 3 by 3, kind of like these pallets that I built here. Work out great for those larger piles. And then you want to turn them every now and then. It's just real easy with a pitchfork to just chuck it right over and build in the next bin. I have a 3-bin system so that at any time I have finished compost, halfway, brand new stuff in my bins. Cold composting does work, and that's literally where you just leave it sit and you don't do anything to it. You don't worry about temperature, but you let it about 140 degrees. You don't turn it. You don't worry how much water's in there. It will work. It'll take a lot longer though than if you just get out there every so often and manage it. Every couple of weeks, if you want a real quick compost, once a month, just go out and turn it and spice it up, and you'll be okay. These are some stuff you can put in compost, some examples of browns, some examples of greens. Some notes here is that, again, Craigslist, people just give away lawn clippings, or you'll see them bagged out by your neighbors. Kind of take a look though, and if you see the yard where you're picking up some clippings is just absolutely beautiful monoculture Kentucky bluegrass, and there's nothing else, that means they most likely spray their yard. Some people differ whether or not that's okay to use in compost. I would much rather err on the side of caution because that stuff does take quite a long time to break down. You don't want to have lawn clippings with herbicides. And manure, say Craigslist is your friend. However, you only want to use manure just to be safe from omnivores. I'm sorry, from herbivores. So not omnivores, not carnivores. So therefore your pets, your dogs and your cats should probably not be going with that. And that's just a disease mitigation issue. Okay, so we built our beds, we've got our compost going. What the heck do we plant in them? You always want to think of being a polyculture. One of the principles was to use and value diversity, along with a couple others that fit in there. So just imagine that you are a ravenous, tomato-munching, terrible bug, and you are so hungry, and you're looking for some tomatoes. Which one would you rather be in? Obviously this one. If you polyculture and you plant a lot of different stuff in the same area, you get all kinds of benefits. One, it confuses pests. If a tomato muncher happens to find this tomato plant right here, well, that's cool. You may lose a little bit of it. You'll hopefully come by and be able to alleviate it, but it's just one. It would need to migrate and seek out and find the other tomato plants. It's not just an all-you-can-eat buffet like this guy right here. Sometimes the different heights can confuse pests or make it harder for them to travel, especially different smells of different stuff can deter pests. And that comes into companion planting. There's stuff that repels bad bugs or can actually benefit from some chemicals that it gives off from the plants that are next to it. Polyculture gives you that. It creates microclimates, which we talked about. You can have some big leafy things that help shade other stuff that needs a little bit of a cooler scenario. And the density of the planting can almost serve as a living deep mulch. So you get to conserve some moisture there. So this is one typical Polyculture Guild, again from that book, of what an apple tree and some stuff planted around it would look like. All kinds of stuff in here, and they all serve a different purpose to protect and aid that apple tree. A food forest. I mentioned this as kind of a zone 3 or a zone 4 type of thing, but if you go out and you look in the woods, and this is what you're going to see, if we can mimic this with edibles, we will just be set because it's self-sustaining. Layer number 1 is a canopy, maybe like a full-size apple tree. Layer number 2 would be a sub-canopy, like a pawpaw tree. Layer 3 is herbaceous, so you kind of think of like some shrubs and things, maybe a blueberry, maybe some big herbs. Number 4 would be, 3 is shrubs, blueberries, stuff like that. 4 is herbaceous, so you got your basils and things there, that are herbs. 5 is a root crop, so maybe a good idea to plant some onion or some garlic. 6 would be a ground cover to help if as a deep mulch, a living mulch. Strawberries work really well for that. And then 7 is a climbing layer. Really good idea maybe to put some bean plants, something that's a legume that can fix nitrogen, which will feed this apple tree and make use of all that wasted space of just the trunk growing up. Now you don't need a huge plot of land and a lot of space to do something like this. This right here, could be starting with this guy, and maybe that's a dwarf apple. Maybe you just have a little dwarf apple 5 foot tall or something and you prune back, you can still try to incorporate all these layers, which is going to help you out. All right, my last topic is using livestock. Doesn't have to be pigs and cattle, but in nature, there's no healthy ecosystem is void of animals. They're always in there doing a job of helping out the plants. The easiest thing that all of us can do, and there's no HOA restrictions against this, is to have a vermicompost bin. Let worms do your composting for you. That stuff is just like gold, especially for seedlings and getting something started, or if something just really needs a boost, you can just top dress with it. There's a picture of my bin that I built. I'm now on version 2. It's doing a lot better than version 1, but there's a picture of my bin. Number 2, and I'm going to be a little biased here, you know what I'm talking about in a couple weeks. The next easiest livestock is chickens. They do so much for you. I've got a few slides here. Everybody thinks, well, chickens are for eggs, right? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. But the number one benefit that chickens get you, in my opinion, is compost. I'm a bit of a compostaholic. I love my chickens mainly for their compost. Their manure is so rich in nitrogen, and if you manage their coop right, and specifically I use a deep litter method because I wanted this to be a compost building machine, you can get so much compost. I figured out the density of chickens that I need, and I've added a couple cents, and the size of coop that I built, so that I can get probably about 3.5 yards of finished compost a year out of this system, which is just perfect for top dressing everything once I have it built. So the deep litter method is simply putting in about 6 inches of dry leaves, which I hoard in the fall, or straw, or wood chips, or something like that. Let the chickens eat and do their thing, which they do, and then eventually you just turn everything, add another few inches of deep litter. You throw some food on the ground every day, and they scratch in it, and they turn your compost for you. It's not just a benefit for me, it's also a benefit for the chickens, because that composting action will take care of all the bad bugs and the bad pathogens and diseases and stuff. So it's actually way more hygienic and natural for chickens to be on deep litter than if this was just a bare run of mud and icky stuff. Benefit number 2, it's not eggs yet. Free labor for chickens. You can use a small chicken tractor, is what it's called. It's something like this. What does it do? Well, one, it's way healthier for the chickens if they can be out on pasture, eating bugs, eating fresh grass. But they'll just mow your lawn for you. Wherever you move this thing, guess what? They fertilize it for you for free. This is on a much bigger scale, which we may not have in our backyard, but I kind of wanted to show this picture of where you can see that this tractor was the day before. This is a farm out in Indiana. That's where Indiana or Indiana? Indiana. But you can see, this is just one day, and he's very mathematical about it. But the point is that if you leave them here longer than the grass can take, they will build a garden bed for you. If you're like, man, I'm so sick of just going out there and chopping up sod and picking it up and hauling it away and finding what to do with all these heavy clumps of grass, if you throw a couple chickens on there for like 2 weeks, they take care of that problem for you. They will build beds. And if you build some kind of a tractor, which I'm doing now, to match the width of if you have raised beds or something, or 4x8, if you make this guy 4x8 and just put that there in the fall, man, they'll eat all the weed seeds, all the bad bugs, anything that's in egg form that shouldn't be there, you don't want there in the spring. They're great little cleanup factories. So, free labor. Number 3, it's not eggs yet, it's compost. And that's because they are wonderful garbage disposals. Anything you normally compost, but also stuff you wouldn't, like meat, dairy that's gone a little sour, cheese, stuff like that. Chickens will just devour it, turn it into great compost for you and eggs. Which is benefit number 4, food security, which I talked about in the very beginning. Benefit number 5, this is obviously his father's son. He's very excited to meet that little guy, which just hatched about 6 weeks ago. Benefit number 6, education. I talk to a lot of kids, you ask them, hey, where's your food come from? It comes from the grocery store, right? Our grandparents would be rolling over in their graves if they hear kids talking like that.
What happens to your chickens if you go on vacation?
If you set up the system right, my personal system, I could leave for probably about 10 days and they would be totally self-sufficient. No problem whatsoever. I have a feeder that's large enough, a water that's large enough, they're happy as clams. Any longer than that, I'd be asking the dog to come over and get more water. that too if we wanted to do a few weeks. I build feeders and waterers out of 5-gallon buckets. It's super cheap and easy to do. Maybe I'd build a second feeder and they'd be good.
They don't know where you.
No, they don't. Chickens, you usually want to keep the I don't want to say the store-bought feed, but their primary feed, you want to keep that freely available to them at all times. They'll just eat what they need. Hopefully you're amending that with letting them out on grass and pasture like I do every day, or you're bringing them some kind of greens and other stuff. They're fine just eating the corn and chicken feed, but it's not as healthy as it could be for them. My biggest surprise since I started keeping chickens a few years ago was that it's even easier than I thought it was going to be. All right, next is bees, something that most of us can do. And, actually, HOAs are not very strict on bees, at least in my research. Benefit number one is pollination. We know that 30% at least of our food nationwide is dependent on pollination. Well, what does that mean for your garden and your tomato plants and your apple trees? Benefit number two is honey. And an average hive, if it does well, you can yield not just what the bees need, but you can take 75 to 100 pounds per hive. And if you go again to Dorothy Lane Market, look what raw, unpasteurized honey costs, that's a pretty big deal. This is Patrick's beautiful hive that he built. This is called a top bar beehive. If you want to get into a more natural beekeeping where you're not medicating and micromanaging all the time, look in the top bar. And last, rabbits.
Oh,
Again,
before you leave bees,
sorry?
isn't there some virus or something that bees have, and does that get expensive then, or?
The bees are hurting. I think we've all heard of colony collapse disorder and stuff that the varroa mites are a really big problem. Now, there's two groups fighting it out, kind of like one of my first statements. A lot of people, myself included, think that it's because we intervened in the first place. There's a lot of people in this area and out west that depend on bees, that bring them up. Georgia's a real hot spot for selling bees. They bring them up north. Well, those Georgia bees aren't used to our type of clover, our type of flowers. They're certainly not used to our type of winter. That's one thing. Another thing is that the typical Langstroth hive, that's what you typically see the boxes that stack up, the most common ones. Those are usually filled with frames that have kind of, I think it's plastic, but a fake honeycomb that the bees then just fill in their stuff, rather than naturally the bees will build their own honeycomb, which is what they do in a system like this. And those honeycombs are a different size in diameter than what bees will naturally build if you leave them to their own devices. And it's larger. And those larger honeycomb sizes, when the queen lays her egg and they cap over and they do their stuff, will allow the varroa mite, it likes that larger size and allows them to just explode in population. So there's been a lot of studies going into what's called small cell bees, small cell beekeeping with something like this. And if you allow the bees to build their own honeycomb, they're more resilient. Now, it's not perfect, and we've been keeping bees so long and breeding them to be so specific and inbred and, what do I want to say, almost like a monoculture to where they're not resilient anymore. They don't have a lot of the wild inherent stuff that would keep them strong.
So do you have bees?
I don't yet. This is one project that my wife says I'm not allowed to do. She tolerates all of my crazy, wacky projects, but this is one that she says no, and I respect that, but I'm working on it. This is Patrick's hive. Feel free to talk to him after. He knows a lot more about beekeeping than I do. That's kind of why I'm really glad he accepted my invitation to come. So if you have any questions on bees, he's the guy to talk to. Anything you want to add to that? Or?
Not much, just that the colony collapse is such an amorphous term that they're throwing out there, and like the Bayer and the chemical companies will say, we don't know what it is, and a lot of scientists are saying it's the neonicotinoid chemicals that they're spraying all over everything in all the monocrop fields, and now there's some studies coming out that's backing that up, so it's really like big pharma that is, the people that rely on the bees to pollinate their crops are the ones that are killing them.
And of course, the answer for them is medicate, feed,
Yeah.
feed, and that all it is a crutch. You think of what hormones and vaccinations and all that kind of stuff, antibiotics has done to large cattle feedlots and allowed them to get weaker and let mad cow come in and stuff we didn't have to worry about a couple decades ago. Same thing with knees. You prop them up with a crutch of medication, they're not going to be as strong and resilient as they need to be. Rabbits we talked about. Did we? Okay.
No, you didn't talk about our rabbits, livestock.
Benefit number one, compost. And I mention here because it's one of the few so-called quote-unquote cold manures that you can put directly on your garden as a top dressing. It doesn't have to age, it doesn't have to compost first. And stacking functions, vermicompost and worm bins just absolutely love processing rabbit pellets. So if you put some worms underneath your rabbit cages, keeps everything clean, hygienic, and you get that wonderful worm casting, which is just wonderful fertilizer. And sustainable and healthy protein. Also some fiber for a lot of people like making stuff out of Angora or rabbit wool or fur, stuff like that. All right, so I went a little bit long, and I appreciate your patience. If we can just take 1 minute if you need to go, I totally understand. But I'm curious, what did you guys write down on your list? And did anything pop into your head that you might be able to try at home to mitigate some of your challenges or to help you towards some of your goals? And this is putting me on the spot and you guys, so if nothing came to mind, that's totally okay, but I want you to take that list home and think about it and maybe come up with something. Anybody have anything they'd like to share?
I realized I built my chicken tractor too heavy, so I'm probably going to park it and do the deep litter method. No one to talk to you about that. But yeah, if you're ever going to make a chicken tractor, don't build it out of 3 cattle panels and roofing panels and then try to move it because it doesn't move. I move it, but it's not fun.
It's giving you a workout.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts or anything they'd like to share as we close?
Have you investigated bats?
Yes, and I am going to build bat houses. Like I said, we moved about 1.5 years ago, and you know, it's not really the country, but this is in the country for us with our 5 acres. And I couldn't believe that first August or so that we'd take walks at dusk and just not be bitten to death. I'm like, what is going on? How is this? And we'd look up all the time at dusk and there's just bats flying everywhere. And I think that does so much to control the mosquito population that I will be putting bat houses in my garden area. And specifically to stack functions, because bat guano, bat manure is such a wonderful fertilizer if you compost it. Guess where I'm putting my bat houses is right on top of my compost piles, because they do most of their manuring while they sleep, or actually right before they go in, before they go to sleep. Do you do bats? Do you have bat houses?
Oh, thinking about it.
Yeah.
If we do have bats in the neighborhood.
Yeah, and you know what? If you give them a happy place that's south or west facing, that gets a lot of sun and with a dark color that heats up overnight, they're a lot less likely to go into your attic. That's another good benefit of having your own bat house.
And bat houses are easy to build. You can almost accidentally build one.
Yeah. Scrap plywood.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of free plans online, and it's just a simple little rectangle. Any other thoughts or questions? Yes, sir.
Like deer tick control, other than just mowing the heck out of the
Chickens. Chickens are outstanding. That's one of the reasons that I like my chickens free ranging. Guinea hens, another type of poultry bird, are also really well, do a really good job. They will just completely take any bug population, especially ticks, out of your grass.
I let mint run wild in my grass. And
That's
I
a
hate
detail.
that. But you got to be okay with mint running everywhere in your grass, which is easy to do if you let mint get away. So.
What about chipmunks?
My Labrador retriever, his Labrador retriever.
We would like you to come and catch ours, please.
All right, well, I just want to thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. If you ever have any questions, anything I might be able to help you with, you can reach me by email there. I have a website and a blog where I kind of post some stuff every now and then, gentlemanhomestead.com, and on Facebook and Twitter. And that community is actually growing a lot faster than I thought it would, and I'm pretty happy about that. It's fun to get ideas from folks and learn from them. So, Thank you very much. I'll be around if you have any questions.
Thank you.